our discussion is writing of a manuscript for publication. I always say it is a discussion because it is not a one-way dialogue. Now, when you begin to write a manuscript, a central idea or a theme or one or two ideas are already there in your mind. So you have to pick on the most relevant topic amongst them. What would be the central idea about which you would be writing on, discussing? If it is a problem, then too there must be a central theme around which the whole paper, the structure of the whole manuscript would be prepared. So that would help you to zero on to your right title. But before zeroing on to the title, you must know certain rules as to writing the title. One is the title should be itself very interesting, which means titles should attract the readers, should create in the readers an interest to explore what is inside the manuscript. If the title itself is something which has been much written of in the past, nothing novel in it, no new method, no new problem indicated by the title, then most of the readers just looking at the title will skip on and move to the next. When they are searching the papers by title on Google Scholar or on any other website, right? So it should be interesting and challenging, right? And very precise, concise, accurate, unambiguous. No double meanings in the title. Straight, you hit the hammer, you hit the hammer on the nail. That is, you are exactly telling in your title what exactly you are trying to explore in this manuscript. What are you talking about? What are you discussing? What are you analyzing in this particular manuscript? And it should be complete, right? It should make complete sense of what you are saying. Avoid abbreviation. Do not use abbreviations. Try to write the full form of all the words, and then try to bring your title to the fewest possible words. आप अपने टाइटल को इतना अच्छा बनाइए कि जो रीडर है वो टाइटल पढ़कर ही समझ ले कि उस पेपर में, उस रिसर्च पेपर में उसको किस प्रॉब्लम के बारे में डिस्कशन मिलेगा, एनालिसिस मिलेगा, and so it will be more interesting and it will attract more number of readers and then your paper will be cited more. So आपकी citation metrics बढ़ेगी, right? It is not that you are publishing for the publication purpose. आपने एक बार publish कर दिया, आपने अपने यूनिवर्सिटी में दिखा दिया, scores मिल गए, that is the end of it. No, citation metrics also counts too much in your research journey as an academician. So you have to see that your papers are cited more often. So one of the best ways is that you frame your titles in such a manner that the readers are attracted. And I will be also speaking about keywords after this, how to get your citation metrics increased over a period of time. Therefore, we say that a good title will reflect what the manuscript will tell the readers or discuss out as the reader moves from introduction to review of literature to the research methodology part to the data analysis part, results, discussions, and so on and so forth. So a good title will be all-encompassing. It will include the central theme of the manuscript on which the manuscript on the topic on which the manuscript is prepared. It will reflect the tone of the writing. Is it a paper which is going to be based on some particular methodology? It is a quantitative paper. It is a qualitative paper. That also is indicated by the very title of your paper. It should also contain some important keywords. Now, keywords are helping you to get your paper indexed, right? Indexed in the right manner so that anyone who is searching with the use of keywords are able to click on the paper at the first book. And as a result, your citation metrics also increase. And there are more readers for your papers in future. Now, here is an example. There is this paper published in January 2021, examining the role of consumer satisfaction within mobile ecosystems. Very clear what the paper is going to do. It is going to examine consumer satisfaction within the mobile ecosystem. So the population is well defined now. Evidence from mobile users. It is talking about the mobile users and how they are going to use that. So it is examining the role of consumer satisfaction within mobile ecosystem. So the population is defined, and then the sample is also, sample unit is also defined. So very precisely it is telling the problem which is going to investigate, right? And it is also telling us indication of from where the evidence is going to be collected. Now, coming to the structure of the manuscript. Now, I'll come back to abstract later on also, but as we proceed, the first part after your title, after the author is defined, we have the abstract, right? And the abstract should not be too long. It should be of say 200 to 250 words. Most of the journals, international journals, are asking for not more than 200 to 250 words. It should be very, it is like a miniature manuscript, right? The whole manuscript put in a nutshell in the form of an abstract, a summarized version of that. So it will be telling briefly about the problem which you're going to explore in the manuscript, or which you're going to define and talk about, discuss the objectives, the purpose or rationale of your study, the methods, whether it is quantitative, qualitative, the research design, whether it is experimental, whether it is causal, whether it is historical, that will be exploratory, all that will be defined. And then finally, after doing the data analysis, you will be also writing briefly about your findings, main findings, not in every finding in the abstract. Please refrain from there. Do not write the entire finding of yours in the abstract. Only the main heading, main findings you can include, and the minor implications or policy implications. You can write few words, few lines on that. Then you should be we should be very consistent in reporting. Right? In the abstract also, the flow of thoughts should be in line, starting from the purpose, ending with the marginal implications and the future scope for similar studies to be conducted. There should be no spelling errors. There should be clarity of sentence structure. Sentence should be short, not too long, not two, three ideas in one sentence, one idea in one sentence. No, don't try to use technical jargon that will confuse the readers, right? So it should be also followed by some keywords. And as I said, keywords are very essential to get your paper index, manuscript index, and it will also help in future search by readers, and you get your citations. Now, for the organizational structure part, usually we follow in writing a manuscript IMRD. What does IMRD means? I mean introduction. First very part of a manuscript is the introduction part. What did you start? It tries to answer this question. It introduces the main topic, the central idea, the central theme as to why you found this particular topic as important to be explored, as important to be discussed, analyzed in this particular manuscript. Along with this, you set the contextual setting, right? This is followed by methods. What did you do, right? To study that problem, to study the topic, that theme which you picked up, that idea which was there in your mind, how did you explore? What were the methods used? What was the research design? What was the population size? What was the sampling? What were the sampling units, right? How was data cleaned? Or what was the quantitative techniques you adopted? Or what are the qualitative techniques you adopted? Whether you used parametric test or non-parametric test. So that has to be defined. Then you move on to your findings, and that would give you the results. So in results, you are telling us exactly what your analysis is, what your findings are. in the form of tables, graphs, images, you can put that. And finally comes the last part, discussion. What does it all mean? So, in context to the objective, you link your findings to the objectives to tell the leaders ultimately what inferences, what conclusions can be drawn from this particular analysis and finding of your data, right? So, introduction is important, methods are important, results are important, and discussion. But there are certain limitations if we organize this. We are not talking about the paper's title, which we have just now spoken of. We have not spoken of clearly defining the authorship, that is, who is the corresponding author, who should be the first author, what should be the order of naming the authors in the paper, right? Abstract, which I've already spoken of, a summarized miniature manuscript in totality, telling us the flow of thoughts as they will occur in the manuscript from the introduction till the conclusions, and finally the recommendations and the multiple implications and future scope of study. And lastly, this is also not talking about acknowledgements, which are very necessary to avoid conflict of interest. We need to acknowledge the support of our peer group, of other faculties, of other researchers who have helped us in writing this manuscript, who may have provided facilities, who may have reviewed the paper, who may have provided us important viewpoints, suggestions while we have submitted our drafts to them for review, right? Then finally, what about the references? We cannot forget them. We have to do in-text citation and also reference. We have put all the references at the end so that we are able to have proper citations of the researchers, authors we have cited in the manuscript so that we can avoid plagiarism, right? In text, while you're writing the manuscript, of course, you're mentioning. If you're directly using the words of any other author, any other researcher, you put them in quotes. But if you are not using the direct words, you do not put them in quotations, but you paraphrase and mention the author's name, and yeah, that you do in text citation. But at the end also you need to put the full details of the paper cited, the author, the year, all as per the requirements of the citations to be done in the reference part. Now, therefore, if we include all these, if we want to remove the limitations of IMRD, then we begin with a sound title, a title which is pinpointing to the central theme, which we are going to explore, about which we are going to write in the manuscript, followed by the details of the authors who are connected to writing, who are directly involved in writing this manuscript. Some order of precedence is decided amongst them. One, the first author, the second author, or the first author can also become the corresponding author, or any other author can also become the corresponding author, who is to be corresponded with, who will be the main corresponding person with the editor of the journal in which the manuscript will be submitted. And he will be the person who will be also responsible to respond back to the reviewers' comments along with the other authors when the reviewers comment come, right? And he has to see that all data, he has to be bearing the responsibility of the authenticity of all the data that is there in the manuscript. He must have the full know-how of how the data was got, what is the data that was analyzed, the source, the data, how it was produced on tables, images, figures, and what are the conclusions and what is the future scope. So he has to know the A to Z of the manuscript so that he can address all the questions and questions of the editor if so it occurs during the review process of the manuscript in any journal. Then as I have already spoken, we then have the abstract of 200 to 250 words, followed by the organization structure, the traditional structure of IMR AD, that is introduction, methods, result, and finally the discussion. But we do not end with discussion, we have to conclude. Conclusion is our own, it has got originality, original ideas as to what we say finally about the problem we have solved, what, how we have added to the existing literature. This is all what we are going to write in conclusion. We are not going to dwell on much on what others have already said. जो औरों ने कहा है उसका डिस्कशन कंपैरिजन एनालिसिस आपने डिस्कशन में कह दिया जब आपने फाइंडिंग्स को कंपेयर किया या एनालाइज किया which are maybe in sync with what other researchers have said or which may not be in sync with what other researchers have said in the past, right? Finally, you have to write the acknowledgements so that you acknowledge the contribution of each and every person who has contributed in any way to your paper, preparation of your manuscript, and finally the references of taking care that all the in-text citations of authors and researchers have been properly referenced in the last. Now, this is usually the journals in the management science. They have this proper structure which they ask for in the authors to write the paper in. They want the introduction followed by the review of literature, the gap areas to be identified and clearly mentioned, the objectives coming out of the gap areas. Finally, going down into the methodology, defining the methodology of study, followed by the analysis, which is your finding part, and followed by your discussion, your analysis of your findings and the interpretation of your findings, ending with your conclusions and management implications, and if any, scope of future study, directions for future research. Most of the management science journals today want the papers to be organized in this particular path. See, if you want your paper to be published in a very particular journal, I would advise that before starting to write the manuscript itself, please target 2 or 3 journals, see the author's guidelines, and start preparing the flow. See, when you write your paper, the flow of ideas can be very different. You may start with your, structuring your methodology first with the tables, graphs, flowing down to findings and then your discussions, your analysis part and discussions. But when you organize them properly, then when you put them on paper, you start with abstract, right? So it is when you are organizing your thoughts, it is in a different manner. You start with analysis with your central theme, your problem in your mind, the gaps identified, and then you can think of the tables, the figures in which you will present your analysis part, then finally your finding, and then your discussion, and then move on. So directions of future research may or may not be there. It is not compulsory, but some of the journals do ask for the future scope of study, right? So please prepare your manuscript right from the beginning, according to the author's guideline, complying with it as you target 2 or 3 journals which are related to the topic. Please see that are they publishing papers? Have they published papers of your area in the past, right? So if they have published papers of your kind, then it is the right kind of journal in which you can send your paper. Because otherwise, if your topic, if your theme area is something very different from what the theme areas are of the journal, they are not likely to even consider your papers, right? They are going to reject it outright. So please see that your topic or the central theme aligns with the broad topic areas in which the journal is publishing papers, right? In the past 2-3 years. And please also read some of the recent papers related to your topic from that journal, right? And also quote those papers, cite those papers. When I say quote, I mean to say cite those papers in your manuscript. It is more likely to get you a favorable review and review by the reviewers of that journal, right? So when I talk of the introduction, it is like the contextual background in which you try to put before the readers your main theme, main problem which you're going to explore, the central idea of your manuscript, right? And you are trying to, in one or two lines, trying to define the research problem in this contextual background which you are telling the readers in the very introduction. It is trying to, in a summarized form, tell us the theoretical framework in which your problem or the central idea of your manuscript lies. So do not be very casual with the introduction part. It is not writing about what happened in past and sentences and sentences, paragraphs and paragraphs. Be precise. If you have a particular model to explore a particular framework by which you are going to talk about the central idea or the problem in hand, then you talk in brief about that problem here. You provide the need for the study. The rationale can be spelled out here in the introduction part, and briefly you also hint at the objectives of the study. Why do you think that the study is important? So you are, in other words, in the very introduction, introducing the problem or the central idea along with the contextual background, because there can be you cannot dream and you cannot write about things which are not there in reality. So there has to be some theoretical background, some contextual background to the theme or the central idea or the problem which you are going to explore in your manuscript. Then you also spell out why do you think that your problem or your idea or your theme is important in the present context. Then you can summarize it by telling what has been written in the past, and also how your paper or how your study will be different. In one or two lines, you can mention how your efforts will be efforts at the study of this central idea or central theme will be very different from what has happened in the past. So that could be mentioned, and in other words, you are trying to set this. You are trying to make a background. You are trying to. आप ऐसा लग रहा है जैसे आप एक भूमिका बना रहे हैं, so that the readers are attracted to your paper to read more. You are trying to attract the readers to read more. You are trying to make them feel as if they read more, they will understand more, and they will get to some novel ideas which are there mentioned in your manuscript, right? They will get something new to read. Existing literature already has spoken much about your central idea, central theme, means the subject area, but the way you are presenting your subject or your topic is novel, your method is novel, or the way in which the problem explored is very new. So you are making, in other words, you are attracting the readers to read more, right? Move from introduction to the review of literature and finally to read the complete paper and maybe cite your paper. So, in other words, you have identified the questions which may be challenging for the readers, and maybe helping them to understand what is the central theme which is discussed in the manuscript. Here also you can mention the experiment, the methods I said, and it could be a generalized experimental design or a quantitative design. Now next is the problem statement. In one clear line, define what is your main problem to which, or your main research problem to which this manuscript is addressed. So, in other words, put the problem in context. What do we already know? Describe the precise issue that the research will address. We already know about this topic this much, but what are we going to explore in this manuscript? The new dimension, right? Show the relevance of the problem. Problem statement एक लाइन का है, तो उसमें ये सारी बातें होनी चाहिए. Relevance पता होना चाहिए. Problem क्या है ये मालूम होना चाहिए. Precise होना चाहिए, very clear होना चाहिए, and it will also help The problem statement will also help the readers to understand the objectives of studies. So from your problem statement, the objectives of studies will be drawn. And so the readers will also better understand the objectives of study if the problem statement is very concise and precise. It could be in one line, but it can be elaborated in 4-5. So a good problem statement is just one sentence, but with several paragraphs for elaboration of the problem statement. As to why do you think that this problem has to be explored can be further analyzed here in the present context of the ecosystem in which you are working, right? Now this is followed by the LR or the review of literature. Now it is a systematic search for published work. Now you are not only, randomly selecting papers and doing a review of literature. Then it is a systematic method which you adopt for any review of literature. Then only you will find the right gaps. And then only when you find the right gaps in the existing literature, maybe in the methodology, maybe in the analysis part, maybe in the dimensions of the problem, right, which have not been explored before. That gap can be only found if you do a systematic review of literature, which means you are not only doing review of literature of recent work or only of past. See that you do a review of literature of all the major contributors to that field to which your research is, your manuscript is related. Always relate your review of literature, your field of study to recent research also done in that field, right? So you will exactly know what was done in the past and what is being done in the recent past, right? This will help to support what is already known. You will have a contextual background to what you're going to state, explore, analyze, discuss, right? Otherwise, there is no background to what you're going to say, right? Because in your discussion part, either you're going to accept some of the past findings of the past researchers, or you're going to refute, or you're going to add, right? So that can be only done when the ground is laid, and the ground for that is laid by a proper LR. So it should be critical, it should be analytical, and a summarized form of the work of others. You are trying to logically put the work of others in some logical order so that you are able to come to arrive at gaps so that you can frame your objectives of study. So there are various ways of doing the review of literature. So why is it done? Very, very aptly said. It will help you to frame the research questions, give you an understanding of the work done by past researchers in that field and what is currently being done in the recent past. It will also help you to understand your topic, your field in depth, right, and identify the gaps. So you have to organize. When you now, once you've read, you start, paraphrasing or citing those researchers. You start writing the review of literature part. So organize your LR by topic, by cause and effect, or grouping by variables. You may have identified certain drivers or variables which are affecting the problem in under study. So you organize these studies by grouping them by variable or by the methodology. Some studies have used quantitative methods, some studies have used qualitative methods, some studies have used an experimental methods, some studies have used some other method. So you group them, right? So your work becomes simpler. Are there gaps, some gaps in the cause and effect or some gaps in the methodology part? So can I use a different method to study the same problem in a different manner and arrive at some new conclusions, new results, right, which will add value to the existing literature? Now, finally, after the gaps, you frame your objectives. Now, objectives have to be always written in using the Bloom's taxonomy. So to examine, to determine, to evaluate, so all active verbs. To estimate, to compare, to analyze, to explore, to assess, to identify, to establish. These should be your words for framing your objective of study. Very precisely, they are telling as to what you are going to do, right? Then next comes the methodology part. You think of the research design, whether it has to be experimental, causal, exploratory, right? Or it has to be historical. So depending on that, you will proceed from one stage to the other. Then you define the population, the broad ecosystem in which the research would be undertaken, right? Your study would be falling with, and then the sampling units, a subset of the population. Then you will zero down onto the sampling technique, whether it is probability based or the non-probability based techniques, random or non-random, right? Purposive. If you want to have the non-random, it is purposive sampling, so you will choose on that. Data collection sources. Now, these are very important. You have to, if it is a survey method you are adopting or field research, then it is primary, right? But if you are using some documents, archives, right, or some secondary data from website or from reports, then that is secondary data. So data collection sources have to be defined, and what kind of data you are going to use in your study also has to be defined. Now, methods of data collection also, as I said, it can be survey, it could be field research, it could be, studying documents, it could be studying reports, it could be drawing down on data from previous studies. Then the scaling procedure, normal, ordinal. If you are doing collection of primary data, so what kind of data has to be collected on what scale and what will be the measurement for that. The statistical tools and techniques finally for analyzing the collected data, right? So all that has to be properly put in place, properly decided before you start to collect your data and even go to the next step, that is to your finding part. So you have to be very precise. Everything has to be in sync. Your flow of the manuscript should move from one to the other, and there should be a link of one part to the other. So as I said, research designs could be these: historical, case research, descriptive, correlation, or prospective, casual, or exposed factor research, or experimental. Then finally, we will come to the finding parts. Now, in some journals today are asking for the results and discussions together, and some are asking for results to be mentioned separately, and some discussions separately. Now, results is just showcasing your findings, right? It is not interpretation. Discussion is the interpretation part. People mix that up. Result is only putting your findings, right? Put them in textual form, right, in statement form, and you can also further use illustrations in the form of figures, images, or tables. But be very sure that tables have footnotes. They have also figures have mentioned the sources, right? They have titles to indicate to the reader as to what they are all about, right? And also remember one very important point, that data should not be repeated. If you're showing something in table, do not repeat that in text, right? It is not a good practice to showcase data in two forms, tables also, and you're writing the same thing in the text also. Please do that. Now, in this finding parts, follow the sequence of the hypothesis. When you're writing the findings, please, if you have certain research questions, your objectives were laid down according to the research questions. Some hypotheses were there, 1, 2, 3. So in the same sequence, place your findings, right? So the reader also is able to link each objective to the flow of the findings, and also he is able to link the findings back to the hypothesis, 1, 2, 3, right? And all figures should have a legend describing as to what the various parts of the figures are trying to illustrate, right? So there are different colors used. Please indicate what colors as to black and gray or whatever the author's guideline decides you how the images or how the figures have to be. First and foremost, you will have to comply with all the necessary indications which are there in the author's guideline as to how the images have to be put in your manuscript, what kind of resolution images are to be there, what is the color supposed to be there of these images, how the tables have to be put, how the figures have to be played. All those guidelines have to be followed strictly. And also remember that you, as you're preparing the manuscript, you prepare each part in line with the author's guideline which you have already downloaded or have studied for the journal for your target journal, right? So that you do not have to rewrite your draft many times, right? It is painful to come back many times back to your manuscript and or to have a rejection in the first go when you send your manuscript to a journal, right? So finally, students, I have ended my discussion with you how to prepare a good manuscript for a journal and how to submit it to a target journal. Remember one thing, students, that if you submit to a journal, to a target journal, you have, with all honesty and integrity, you have tried to, make the manuscript as compliant with the author's guideline, and you have also written your first draft, showed it to your peer group. They have reviewed it. They have You have received criticism. You have received suggestions. You have tried to incorporate them as inputs, valuable inputs from your peer group, from your supervisor. But when you submit to a journal, it is either rejected or it goes for 2-3 reviews. Now, if it is rejected, remember many classic papers today have been rejected in the first go. So it is not, rejection doesn't mean you get frustrated that okay, I cannot write a good manuscript. No, go back to your manuscript, see what are its weaknesses, right? Try to draw a new conclusion. Try to analyze your data in a new manner, right? Or if there are reviewers coming back, a major revision or a minor revision is asked for, comply with the comments of the reviewer. Do not fight it out. Do not argue. The reviewer is an expert in your field. He knows exactly what went wrong or what are the lacunas in your manuscript, where you can improve. Take them as positive comments by the reviewer. Try to incorporate all the inputs of the review and give them a prompt response. Please prepare the draft manuscript once again, incorporating the reviewer's comment, color them, go back to the questions, go back to the reviewer's comment, see that we have answered each one by one, and then finally upload the revised version of your manuscript and wait for the reviewers' comments and final decision, right? So thank you, students, and thank you, researchers, for being such patient listeners. And any questions, I will be happy to address them.
Sir, is there any query? And we are checking, just wait. And there is one query.
Is there a query, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
Could you read out the query, ma'am?
Ma'am, it's from Jyoti Yadav. How many people we need to read for LR? Ma'am, it's in chat box.
Yeah. I've seen now. To be very honest, 20 to 25, but 30 is the ideal. 20 to 25, but ABDC and good journals at least ask for minimum. Ideal number is 30. Any other question?
Ma'am, one from Babita. What are the parameters to publish paper in an international journal?
As I said, first and foremost, after you have the idea of as to what is the theme of your paper manuscript going to be, please explore some 2-3 target some journals and go to their website, see what are the guidelines, see whether they have published in that particular field in which you are wanting your paper to be published, right? Suppose you are targeting some A journal and that A journal is not publishing, has not published in the recent past any paper related to your topic, then it is more likely that it will be rejected in the first go, not accepted at all, even for review. Right? So you will be wasting your time sending your paper in that journal. So at least have 2-3 journals in mind before you start writing your paper, so that you are writing it as per the requirements of the journal, as per the guidelines, author's guidelines. Another parameters, as I said, is IMRD, which is the organizational structure of a manuscript, which you have to follow. So you will have to have a clearly defined abstract, a miniature form of your manuscript, followed by keywords will help in the indexation of your paper once it is sent, submitted, accepted, and published. It will help you to get citations in future. Then you start with the main structure, main body of the paper, that is starting with the introduction, where you will set the contextual setting, background to your paper, central theme or field of study, right? You will also briefly hint at the novelty that is there in your study, maybe by way of the methodology you have employed or the framework which you're using, how it is different from existing literature. So you are mentioning the past, but you are more so showcasing what is going to be novel in your particular study, right? Then it will be followed by a systematic literature review, and as I said, it has to be past also the recent works which have to be cited there. Paraphrasing is to be done. Quotations have to be used where you are quoting the researchers in their own words as they have written in their studies, followed by your defining of your research design, right? Followed by your data collection, analysis part, writing down your findings in the form of results, discussing them in your discussion part, comparing, refuting, analyzing, and finally telling the readers how your work is adding to or how your work is refuting the things said by the researchers in the field, in similar field, in the similar topic which you have spoken of, which you have written your study, how is it different, and finally coming down to the conclusion part where you are trying to focus more on originality rather than repeating what you have written in the finding part, right? And finally, you may also mention some of your limitations and also scope for future research. And if there are managerial and policy implications, they can be also indicated after the conclusion part. Yes, somebody is asking me, I am a scholar of English and my research area is poetry. Can I publish paper in novel fields? Yes, I'm not a person from the English field, but as far as I think that there must be some areas of poetry which are not being explored and which could be explored, or the existing areas could be explored in a new dimension. So there is always scope for writing papers in every field, right? And please always remember that when you are doing your reference part, use a reference manager, mentally EndNote, and you have a proper style for writing your references as per the requirements of the journal. It could be APA style, Chicago style. These all different styles could be used. Any other question?
No, ma'am, it's done. Thank you so much, ma'am. Please accept our sincere appreciation for the outstanding presentation you made. Thank you so much for sharing your time and experience with us.
Thank you, ma'am, for inviting me. And I'm honored and I'm thankful to the management of BMU University for inviting me and inviting me for this occasion of delivering a lecture for the research community of learners. Thank you so much.
So nice of you, ma'am.
Can I end the session, ma'am?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, you can leave.
Thank you.
Now, I'm giving over to our Dean Academic Affairs, Dr. Harish Sharma, sir, to conclude this program and vote of thanks.
Maybe I'm waiting for lights. Thank you. Yes,
Okay.
please, you can carry on.
Sir, I'm inviting you to conclude this session and a vote of thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Dear participants, as you know, the session of today was very enlightening. I was also listening this session. And since the day one, from inaugural to valedictory, we had gone through 36 sessions. These 36 sessions had been tremendously very fruitful for all the participants, the faculty members, and some of professionals from industries also. When we thought of introducing this topic to research scholars, we had this thing in mind that yes, this is a topic which is very much required for scholars in today's time. Why it is important? Because this is one of the foundation of any research, the publication part and the ethical part. You know, the ethics are very important in life, in all spheres of life. But my point is, we are doing a very pious degree. Pious means your PhD, doctoral program. It is a very pious degree. Why I'm calling it pious? Because the findings, the conclusion part, many of times it is very, very useful, and we can implement also for society, for nation, and for any particular group. The research scholars, what they do, it is always been or unquote these. at any platforms. So whatever you publish, it should be very authentic, very reliable, and very valid. These 36 sessions, we have invited all good people from all sphere of life. I start with congratulating or rather thanking our Honorable Chancellor, sir, Mahant Balaknath Ji Yogi, his blessings. Our management nominee, ma'am, Madam Anjana Rao Ji, she always ready to introduce or to say yes to these kind of programs, because ultimately this is what we contribute to a research scholar community. When we had gone for these 14 days program, she straightaway said, yes, we should do it and university should come forward for this. I'm very much thankful for Madam for granting us such a permission for a beautiful program. I'm thankful during this, our new registrar, Dr. Inderjeet Ji, he was also participating in the duration of this, and our new Vice Chancellor, Professor Ramesh Kumar Yadav Ji, we briefed him, and he was also of this view that yes, university should go for these kind of programs in future also. I'm thankful for all the organizers, the conveners, faculty members, speakers, and of course, participants, that they have shown a tremendous energy for 14 days all around. Roughly 500 people were continuously associated with the programs and getting the best out of the best. Start with the very first session, gentlemen, the problems in ethical issues of research in social sciences. This was the first session which was taken up by Professor R.S. Yadav from Jain Vishwa Bharati Institute, Ladnu, Rajasthan. He briefed a couple of research aspects very nicely. Then we had gone to philosophy, definition, nature, scope, and concept. The session was taken up, very lengthy session was, very exhaustive session was taken up by Dr. K.S. Gupta. He was Director, Center for Quality Mind, Bangalore. I'm very thankful, Dr. Gupta, for such a nice deliberations for the research scholars as well as faculty members. Then we had a very good participant, Mr. Abhishek Yadav. Is a BMU alumnus, a data analyst from Miami, USA. The role of data analytics in present research scenario. Gentlemen, it was a very apt topic to give you the importance of data, because ultimately in any research, data is data. If you utilize it properly, you will find the best conclusions in your research. If you misutilize it, the research can go to any directions. So I'm very thankful that at a very odd time, Mr. Abhishek has given us a lot of deliberations on data analytics, and I personally feel that in future, we will be inviting him for another kind of programs for data analytics field. This is a very, very valuable session from Abhishek. I'm very thankful for Abhishek for this. We had Dr. Sanjay Singh from OP Jindal University, Raigad, spoke on ethics and respect to science and research. Gentlemen, the kind of topics we have taken up one by one, and the speakers, they justified each and everything. Dear scholars, these sessions were really taught us, or might have taught you, about the true definition of research, publication, and the ethical dilemma which is involved in our research or the doctoral programs. Then we had Dr. Jyoti Kukrija. She was from Jagannath International Management School, New Delhi. She spoke on nature of moral judgments and reactions. It was a very good session from Dr. Jyoti. When we talk about moral judgments and reactions, this is very, very necessary in any of research, gentlemen. We had a true researcher from Ashutosh College of University of Calcutta, Dr. Vidhisha Datta. She spoke on intellectual honesty and research integrity, which is very essential. Any kind of integrity in our life is required, and in research, if you follow research integrity, it is wonderful on the part of research scholars. Then we had Dr. Priya Solomon, an authority from MIT University, Noida, on scientific misconducts, falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism. Another important aspect of research, gentlemen, plagiarism. The criteria is different from university to university, but UGC accepts 10%, below 10% plagiarism is allowed. So if it is allowed below 10%, so we have to take care the plagiarism aspect with very honesty part. So she talked about all these kind of fabrications and falsifications in her speech. Then we had Professor Dr. Rajat Gera. Rajat Gera from Jain Deemed University, Bangalore. Redundant publications, duplication, overlapping publications, and salami slicing. Yes, we should have, we should take care about the overlapping publications. You can send once or two places, but you should take care. If one is published, you should immediately withdraw that part. So, or you should wait for that part, that once it is rejected or it is not accepted or it is returned to you, then you can go ahead to other publication agency. Then another friend of ours, Dr. Harish Sharma from Sharda University, Greater Noida. He was speaking on selective reporting and misinterpretation of data. Another very good aspect in our research publications, that when you misinterpret any data, the conclusions could be different, gentlemen. One gentleman, we had another session, also the best practices and standard setting initiatives and guidelines. Dr. Vidhisha Datta taken from University of Kolkata, and Dr. Ritesh Gupta from Chaudhary Bansilal University, Bhiwani, taken a session on conflicts of interest. Yes, this is what we explain, the conflict of interest. Another very fruitful session, Dr. Ritesh. Dr. Ritesh is a very seasoned professor from the management field, and he has also made a lot of deliberations very positive to our research scholars. Dr. Vimlesh Singh, Associate Professor, Manorachna International University, Faridabad, spoke on publication misconduct. The concept problems lead to unethical behavior and vice versa. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how we had continued our journey with a lot of aspects related to publications and ethical issues. And I personally feel all those speakers, they have justified their knowledge, their information, their attitude, their aptitude nicely to our research scholars. Then Dr. Mohit Maurya, School of Business Studies, Sharda University, spoke on violation of publication ethics, authorship and contributorship. Another very, very good session taken up by Dr. Maurya. Identification of publication misconduct and complaints and appeals, Dr. Prasanna Dasgupta from FOMC ICFI Tripura. Now you look at the kind of sessions, the kind of speakers we have taken in this particular program, from Kashmir to Kanyakumari and from Assam to Gujarat. We have covered almost length and breadth of the country to give you the best on these topics. Dr. Saurabh Mittal from Greater Noida, GL Bajaj Institute of Management and Research. He spoke on predatory publishers and journals. Another very important area in an academician life, that how to publish and take care of the journals. What is the level of the journals? What is the rating of the journals? All these aspects they have covered by Dr. Saurabh Mittal. Dr. Nitin Kumar Saxena, Jaipuria School of Business, Noida, covered specific ethical issues and authorship parts. Another fruitful session taken up by, again, Dr. Ritesh Gupta with a group discussion part on conflict of interest. Dr. Anand Sehgal, IP University, New Delhi, taken up complaints and appeals against the research publications. Dr. Nimit Gupta, we are thankful that North Cap University Gurugram taken a session on open access publication and initiatives. Another very, very important session, gentlemen, on open access publication and initiatives taken up by Nimit Gupta. We are thankful that the kind of topics which were taken up by the all professors, they justified very nicely. Dr. Archana Bhatia taken a motivational session on human values during pandemic COVID-19. This was also taken up very intentionally, that we all were behind the doors and inside homes. So something was required to motivate or to lighten up, to gear up all the research scholars regarding this. Dr. Mohit Arya, another session taken up, software tools to identify predatory publication developed by SPPU. All these statistical packages, how we introduce this was justified by Dr. Mohit Arya very nicely. Then we had Dr. K.S. Gupta spoke on various areas at length on conflict of interest, group discussions, and some of the general suggestions, tools, GNA, Elsevier, Finder, Springer, general suggestions. We had Dr. Seema, MIT University, Noida, regarding complaints and appeals, very good examples of fraud from India and abroad. Dr. Aditya Gupta, MIT University, Noida, what kind of software tools we use for plagiarism, like Turnitin, Orkund, or other open source of tools. We have in our university, verified by UGC or given to us, the Orkund. But we use sometime Turnitin also. So it is a message to research scholars that whenever you write a paper, you can get it plagiarism for this, but whenever you're writing a thesis, don't get it for plagiarism again and again for your information on for your chapters or for your thesis, because ultimately then you have to produce a certificate that you had already undergone this, then we have to do a minus for this. Otherwise, it will be add up to your current assessment of your thesis. Dr. Rakesh Garg, MIT University, taken a databases, indexing databases, another very important topics, how to make the databases. And citation databases, Web of Science and Scopus. Another important point, now Scopus has got a tremendous importance in our research publication part. So he justified this topic very nicely on these two topics. Research matrix taken up by Dr. Nitin Kumar Saxena. We are thankful that he was from Jaipuria School of Business, and he justified the topic very nicely. And Dr. Shalini Agrawal taken up a topic called impact factor of journals as per journal citation reports, SNP, SGR, IPP, site scores matrix, H index, G index, HO index, and ALT matrix. All these topics were related to the finding the impact factor of any journals. You have to see that whether it is 3.5, 3.8, 4. So you can very well check up, and then you can send your papers to these concerned journals after seeing this impact factors. I hope all of you might have got a lot of information through this lecture by Dr. Shalini Agrawal. Again, Dr. Priya Solomon, a very impactful session on writing of manuscript for publications. So, gentlemen, these were the sessions we have taken up for all these topics. My point is very exhaustive for 14 days. It is a certified course by the university as well as other authorities. Whatever you have gathered this, my sincere advice to all the research scholars is kindly prepare notes. You might have prepared notes, or if all these speakers, they have provided you some of the PPTs. If not, we will request them to provide these PPTs, but prepare some notes and some kind of material. So from the next generations, this material can be utilized for the researchers to come. I inform all the research scholars, this paper is introduced for the first time by UGC, and we are the one amongst very few ones who has introduced this paper for the research scholar as well as faculty members, because it is essentially part of your doctoral program, your PhD coursework program. So our point was, why to give you a one type of the input. So we had given you many directions input to you, variety of information, variety of knowledge, varied kind of inputs to our research scholars. So those whosoever our own research scholars of the of BMU or the other outsiders participants, I personally feel this had been a very, very fruitful program, 14 days. And my very sincere thank to my management and to our convener, stood on feet all these 14 days, because the conduction of program, I mean, the planning part is not very difficult, gentlemen, but the conduction of program is very, very difficult. I thank all my coordinators, all my anchors, that they have set the agenda of the program initially. Like today, I think for the session, Dr. Nidhi is there.
So Dr. Nisha.
Dr. Nisha, I'm sorry.